All right, everybody, welcome. First called shot lunch of 2020. Have a pretty nice crowd. Nice to see Tad and some of my friends from the Louisville chapter here, who I got to meet last, almost a year ago, last March. Couple of quick admin things. As you know, we're not doing a SABR Day event here in Baltimore. We're going to push DC's event, which I believe is next Saturday. So we'll send the link and stuff for them. It's all Zoom, of course. As of now, everything is still on for the convention. I know that Scott Bush is meeting with the Orioles on the phone later this week and start discussing ticket options and all that stuff for the game. I believe it'll probably be the Friday night game because according to the Orioles schedule, the Saturday game, which are usually the most expensive, and it is Boston that weekend, is an afternoon game at 4 o'clock. So more than likely it'll be the Friday night game that will go to, assuming the convention actually happens at this point. But all hands are on deck and we are moving forward. No other chapter announcements as far as I know. I don't think we have any other officers here. John is just joining. But we are booked for all of our meetings through April. We will not have a called shot lunch in February, which I believe is the 16th, because that's the same 3 nights that the Babe Ruth Museum is doing their birthday bash events in the evening. So we're totally going to support them. So we won't have a daytime lunch visit in meeting in February. So now we'll move on to our speaker, who is, I think he lives in Indiana, or is it Kentucky? No, you're Kentucky? All right. Well, Kelly lives in Kentucky. I had the pleasure of meeting him last year when my nephew out to Louisville for the first time for his 18th birthday, and met Tad and Kelly and a few of the other wonderful guys out there. They actually got us a tour of Slugger Field, the Louisville Bats home park in March, and we're able to, I was able to see that park and of course take my nephew AJ to the Slugger Museum for his 18th birthday. He's now a freshman at the University of Pittsburgh. Kelly graciously gave a copy to my nephew and later sent me one of his book, Just Like Me, which he'll talk about today. I think it came out in 2020. I'll let him tell the background. There will be a second volume down the line, and he will fill you in on all that. So let's hold questions till the end or put them in the chat. And I'm going to go on mute and let Mr. Park take it over, and we'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Peter. I will apologize. Obviously, I woke up this morning with a head cold, so hopefully we will get through this. What's the song verse? Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. I've got hot tea to the left of me, tissue to the right. So just bear with me, and I do apologize. Is it okay if I share my screen real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
So these are the players that I interviewed. Just to give you a little backdrop to this book, 10 years ago, well, actually 2010, I was reading a lot of books, baseball biographies of players pre-World War II. And as many, I'm sure in this group, but across SABR, eventually you're going to read the glory of their times. Well, I read that book and it intrigued me so much because of all of the other biographies I had read. I was reading stories from a different perspective. Merkel's Boner was the one that really stood out to me. I read it in Christy Matheson's biography. I read it in the book Crazy 08. And then two players in The Glory of Their Times told their version of that story. I love the book. So I eventually just wanted to find a book like Glory of Their Times, basically a second edition. During my search, I come across a review of Glory of Their Times. And the reviewer said, this book is so well written, I feel like I'm on the field with the players. Well, I can be a little cynical at times. And my first thought was, I never had the ability to be on the field with these players, but I sure have a lot of great memories of playing youth baseball. It was just kind of a throwaway thought. Well, in my job, I travel quite a bit. I couldn't get this thought out of my head. So I started searching for a book about former professional baseball players' memories of playing youth baseball. I just wanted to know what their stories were. And there wasn't a book out there. So again, sitting behind the wheel of my car, driving around, I just kept thinking about it. And finally, in looking for a new project or a new challenge, I decided I was going to do this. I have no connections in baseball, have no connections in the publishing world. I was as big a nobody in those two worlds as anybody. So I was starting from scratch. Did my research, put a plan together. And if you'll see on this list of players, the first four players here, Jim Hickman, Hawk Taylor, Phil Ruth, and Boog Powell. They were my foundation. If they had not agreed to meet with me, I don't think I would have completed this book. I wouldn't have gotten this far at all. But it was strictly by chance that I got these four players. Jim Hickman was a player that was signed by the St. Louis Cardinals, and then in the expansion draft picked up by the Mets. He still holds a lot of first for the Mets. First player to hit for the cycle, first player to hit, I think, 3 home runs, many first with the Mets franchise. Well, how I got his interview, one of my biggest customers is the sawmill business, the forestry industry. And I was visiting one of my larger sawmills in Tennessee, and the owner, out of the blue, and this is right after I'd started thinking about this project, probably 2 or 3 weeks. The owner points to this guy up on the what they call the log deck, and he said, "You know who that is?" I said, "No, I guess it's your maintenance guy." He said, "Well," he said, "You know who Jim Hickman is?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's his son." That was my first in. And I immediately asked the owner, I said, "Terry," I said, "does Jim still live around here? And would he be interested in talking to me?" We talked to his son talked to Jim. Lo and behold, got Jim. From there, Phil Ruth, I was trying to set up an interview with him. He's from Paducah, Tad's hometown, which is about 30 minutes from where I live. And one of my best friends, a guy I play golf with every weekend, is an attorney. And I was, again, not getting anywhere with my request. No one knew me, and no one was going to take a chance on this nobody. So I was talking to my buddy, and I said, "Tom," I said, "would you be willing to write a letter of recommendation and maybe sign off that, listen, this is legit. You know, I'm not trying to do something just to meet former players." And he said, "Well, who you looking to get a hold of?" I said, "Phil Ruth." He said, "Well, Kelly, Phil is the father-in-law of my son-in-law, or my brother-in-law. So lo and behold, I got that interview. Then from there, Phil put me in touch with Hawk Taylor. At the same time, in Baltimore, my two sons were involved in a high school club called the Technology Students Association. And their annual meeting was in Baltimore, and they had tickets to a game. And I knew Boog Powell sat out in front of his barbecue stand signing autographs. So my wife and I followed along with the kids to Baltimore, went to the game, and my wife, afraid of what was going to happen, quickly left me at the game. I stood in line as I walked up to Boog. He was looking for something to sign. I said, "Hey, Boog, I got a request. I'd like for you to allow me to interview you for a book." And I gave him a quick elevator pitch. He said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Set it up through the office." We set it up, and there we went. So from those four guys, this whole book, this whole project materialized. So what it is I sat down with these players. There's 36 players. And I told them up front, what I want to talk about is your memories of youth baseball. If you want to talk about your major league career, that's up to you. I just want to keep it youth baseball. And I think that intrigued the players. What I got back from the players when I initially solicited interviews would be a chuckle, be like, "Kelly, that was a long time ago. I don't know if I remember much." But by the end of the interview, as I'm trying to close the interview up, turn off my recorders, because I told them I would not take more than 40 to 50 minutes of their time. As I'm shutting down my recorders, they're remembering another story, and I'm scrambling to get my recorder going again. But as I'm going through the interviews, I realized that, I'm missing out on two other groups. And those groups were the Negro League players and the ladies from the All-Americans. So I began doing some research, and I was able to get 4 players from each to talk to me. The players that I talked to were so accommodating, so polite, so respectful of me, that I think that was the greatest takeaway for me. And 2 players, Phil Necro and Don Sutton. I've had several players that's passed away that I've talked to, and it really pains me that Phil and Don passed away, because they made me feel like they didn't have anything better to do in their day. They sat down with me, and it was all me. They weren't preoccupied with anything else, and they genuinely acted like they wanted to see this book, see it completed. And they told me a lot of great stories that just do not happen in today's society with kids and the way youth baseball is set up today. But I've got many stories of my travels to meet these players, and we can get into that, or we can open it up now for questions, and then we can just we can go from there. I can tell you stories about all the players, some of the things about my travels, but I don't want to sit here and talk and bore you about things that you're not really interested in. So if you want to know anything about the players, I'm ready to open it up and go with it.
Well, to start out, I would be interested in your contact with Lou Whitaker.
Lou Whitaker, what was funny about Lou, and there's one player that I did not interview, and Peter held up my book, the cover right here. This is a team out of Greenville, Mississippi, George Boomer Scott. I'd called George and he said, Kelly, sure, I'd love to talk to you. Next time you're in the area, call me and we'll set it up. So about a month later, I called him. He said, yeah, come on by. He said, but call me the day before just to make sure. So I called him the day before and he said, Kelly, I don't feel real well. Can we put it off till the next time you're in town? Well, unfortunately, George passed away about 2 weeks after that. But one question he asked me, and Lou asked me the same thing, was, how did you get a hold of me? And I told them both, I said, you know, there's this thing called the white pages, AT&T white pages. He said, you guys are they were listed. Their landlines were listed in the local directory. So I just looked them up. Lou was very engaging with me. His stories were more about the appreciation of his experiences growing up. He was laser focused on baseball. He was not a kid that was wanting to play basketball or wanting to play football. He was laser focused on baseball. He gave a lot of credit to his coaches growing up. And he felt like it was the greatest childhood that anyone could have. He wasn't interested in going to games. He wanted to play. He had an opportunity to go to in Martinsville, Virginia, and he had an opportunity to go maybe to a game in Baltimore. And he's like, no, I'm not interested. I got a game to play here today. So he was all about youth baseball. And he felt like it was the greatest experience, and it really prepared him for his professional career.
May I ask a question? I'm joining
Yes,
you
sir.
all. I'm joining you all from the Boston chapter, and I appreciate that story about the boomer, because we in Boston, we still think of George Scott as being the greatest first baseman we've ever had, certainly of the modern era of baseball. So I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
George was so polite. I hated that I didn't get a chance to sit down with him. Just our couple of phone conversations that we had, he was just so nice. And I think, like I said, these players, they don't get asked about their youth baseball careers. So when I brought it up to them, it took them a minute to wrap their heads around it. And once he started thinking about it, he was really excited about it, I believe. But he was when I was talking to him, his health was really declining. And yeah, I just hated the fact that I wasn't able to talk to him. But he was a slick fielder, wasn't he?
Oh man, he hit the taters.
He did. Long taters is what he hit. Long taters. I'll tell you a little story. I'm sorry.
How about Lou Piniella?
Lou Piniella. So Lou, I hooked up with Lou through his representative. This was slow going. Again, I had no connections. So one avenue I took in contacting these players was looking up who their management agency was or representatives was. So I tracked down Lou's representative, and in conversation with him, he set me up with Lou. So Lou was living in Tampa, and I was told to meet Lou at his golf club on a certain day. So I drove down to Tampa. His golf club was in this enclosed community. So got through the gate. They were expecting me. Went to his the golf club, into the restaurant, and Lou was so engaging. I mean, I think he was having a big time talking about all these different stories that he was remembering about going out to California. I think it was in his Pony League or Coat League team. And, you know, he was a teammate of Tony La Russa. And you could tell he still stuck in his craw a little bit that LaRussa got a bigger signing bonus than he did because he felt like he was a better player than Tony. But they went out west to the tournament, and during their off day, they went up into the mountains, and Lou fell, twisted his ankle. He said he broke a bone in it. And he played the next day, but he wasn't very effective. He felt like that was what cost them winning the tournament. But in talking to Lou, we're having this conversation, and I'm starting to wrap it up. And he said, Kelly, he said, there's a lot of major league players around here and members of this club. He said, I can get you set up with them. And my mind is racing. Now, we had set this up. I had told Lou, we'll do lunch. I'll cover lunch. Like it really mattered to him. It was his club. But he tells me he's naming off Wade Boggs. He's naming off Fred McGriff, all these other players. My mind is racing. And he said, just get back with me and we'll get something set up. I got up and left. Stuck him with the bill. I had interviews set up. If you'll see on the second row of players, Harold Hare and Arthur Hamilton, they were two Negro League players. I had interviews set up with them in Jacksonville, Florida that evening. So, I get up and I leave. I'm halfway between Tampa and Jacksonville, and I remembered, oh my God, I stuck Lou Piniella with the bill. And to this day, it haunts me. I want to take him to lunch and buy him lunch because his stories were fantastic. His father and uncle played a lot of baseball. And what Lou would do and his friends, they'd get up early the next morning after the adults played, and they would just go looking through the infield and around the grandstands looking for money so that they could go buy baseball cards. But he alluded a couple of times to his fiery nature, tongue in cheek, good-heartedly. But yeah, he didn't shy away from his aggressiveness out on the field. But he was a great guy. Just so fun to be with.
Good, thanks.
As sorry.
Go ahead.
As the former Negro League players told you about their youth baseball, did they allude to any limitations they felt about their prospects as they were growing up?
Here, the difficulty I had in interviewing the Negro League players and the ladies from the All-American players, is that they kept going back to their professional careers. And I had to keep pulling them back to their youth. They didn't have a lot of opportunities. Bill Greason, and Bill's still alive. Bill is 98. He's a preacher down in Birmingham, Alabama. He didn't really have an opportunity to play baseball as a youth. He played some softball, but it was really more football that he played. And he didn't really start playing baseball until he got out of the military. They had some youth leagues, but it wasn't that organized. It was, he grew up in Atlanta, and they had one city park that they went to, the Negro League, or the Negro African American community went to, and so they didn't have many opportunities. Jim Zapp and Bill Greason played with Willie Mays on the Birmingham Black Barons. Jim grew up on the north side of Nashville, and they didn't have any organized leagues there. And if he wanted to play, he had to go to the south side of Nashville. And he just, his mother was very strict with him and wouldn't let him leave. So he played a lot of just sandlot ball in open fields, open lots. And he was the same way. He didn't start playing baseball organized until he went to, was drafted in World War II. And he played over in Hawaii around Pearl Harbor with Harold Hare and Arthur Hamilton. Arthur, it was funny, the Indianapolis Clowns came to town and their catcher got hurt. And they were looking for a catcher. And somebody told the manager, said, hey, there's a little guy over there. His name's Arthur. He can catch. So they picked Arthur up. Arthur was 16. They took Arthur from Jacksonville, Florida, took him to Daytona Beach and then on down to Miami, and he was catching for them. And he played for the Indianapolis Clowns for up until 57, I guess, when the league shut down. But wasn't a lot of opportunity for them as kids. Harold Hare, Jacksonville had more opportunities than the other than Nashville or Atlanta had.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
another Boston chapter member chiming in here. Three questions. First of
Yes.
all, how did nobody finally find a publisher? Do you have a good Al Oliver story? And how did you select the ladies from the All-American Girls League?
Okay. In doing this book, okay, one of the players I interviewed, his name was Jack Ricani. Jack lives in Chicago now, and he's written several books. So when I interviewed Jack, and I was well aware of Jack because he played baseball at Murray State University, which is my alma mater, Murray State. So in talking to Jack, he said, Kelly, why don't you just self-publish? Self-publishing is perfect for someone who is writing a book, writing a biography, writing a fiction book, poetry, whatever it may be. But for me, I was looking to get stories from former players. And teams and or organizations and or representatives, they did not look at me with any type of credibility without a publisher. I didn't start soliciting publishers until I got to maybe 15 players. Literary agents didn't want to have anything to do with me. Here's what I got back from literary agents. We love the idea. We think it's a great idea, but you're a nobody, so we're not interested. So I turned my attention to small publishers, and I was honest with the publishers. I said, this is my, in putting together my proposal. So this is my idea. This is what I'm looking to accomplish. Here's some of my stories, but I can't really go any further until I get a publisher. So just in being honest with the players or with the publishers, that's how I got Sunbury Press to take the project on. With the All-Americans, it was really more about who I had access to, who would agree to talk to me. Irma Bergman and Audrey Kissel, they're both in St. Louis, and I was able to contact Irma's biographer. Her name was Pat Tracy, and Pat set it up for me to interview those two. And then with Lois, again, I looked her up in the white pages, Lois, and then Lois got me connected with Katie Horseman. Katie is a it was such a great interview. She was after, let's see, after she played in the All-Americans, she became a nun, and then she left. She became the first nun to get a bachelor's and a master's degree, I believe. But then she left and she went into teaching. She won 8 state championships in track and field and 2 state championships as a coach in cross country. And she is a member of 5 different Hall of Fames. She's a pretty dynamic lady. Al Oliver, when I first became aware of baseball, I'm a St. Louis Cardinal fan. I live in the far western part of Kentucky, so St. Louis is the team. But when I became aware of baseball, that was when the Minnesota Twins, the Baltimore Orioles, and the Pittsburgh Pirates were really going strong. And those 3 teams become kind of the top tier teams for me. So Al Oliver, I always liked watching him play. You hear about Al's confidence. He definitely expresses his confidence in talking to him. He grew up playing with Larry Hassel, if you remember Larry. And he talked a lot about how Larry could hit a baseball 500 feet over the fence, but he could hit it through the fence. That he hit it so hard he hit it through the fence. But yeah, just a great pleasure. But he showed that confidence today as he did as a player. So yeah, it was a good conversation with Al. My time with Phil Negro. Once I got about 75% of the players interviewed, I had built up some credibility where someone within the Major League Baseball industry agreed to help me finish off my interviews. So Phil Necro, Don Sutton, Louis Tiant, Tony Oliva, Bert Campaneris, this individual helped me get those set up. So with Phil, I talked about how he was so accommodating to me. I met him in the little town he lived in, Flowery Branch, Georgia. He said, "Hey, Kelly, meet me at Common Grounds Coffee Shop at 10 o'clock on this day." So I showed up and there he was. They said, "Let's go upstairs." And we went upstairs and we just sat and talked. And he told me so many stories about how he learned how to throw the knuckleball. The stories that all the players told me about their equipment were so interesting because they all grew up in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, which again is completely different than it is today. But yeah, Phil, we spent probably about an hour and 15 minutes together, and he was just completely engaged with me. But talked about his tape ball. He learned to throw the knuckleball with a ball that they had made out of tape. And he actually found that ball when his mom passed away. They were cleaning her house out, and he found that ball in her basement. But yeah, he was a really nice guy.
Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Two questions. The first is, how did you find youth baseball, or did you let the players define youth baseball themselves? In other words, was there a cutoff of age 18 or something? And then the second question is, Steve Blass, what are your conversations with Steve about?
When we were talking about youth baseball, I didn't have a cutoff. I just wanted them to start talking. and to go in whatever path they wanted to take. So yeah, we didn't have a set cutoff. And you'll see there's a lot of stories in the book referencing their pro career, that it would transition into their pro career. I tried to keep them geared towards their non-professional. When I say youth, I guess I should say non-professional career, but that just didn't sound as good as youth baseball. So yeah, that's how we kept that. As far as Steve Blast, oh gosh, I talked to him on the phone, and he was at the airport when I talked to him, and so we had to stop a conversation and then kick it back up again. But he easily stayed within his youth career. He didn't bounce forward at all. He was a long distance runner. He loved running track, running long distance, and he talked quite a bit about that. He talked about how he was the first, and he thinks probably the only person in his hometown there. They didn't have a uniform big enough for him on the team he was on, or small enough for him on the team he was on. So they traded him over to the other team that had a uniform that fit him. He told me a story, and this is back in the 50s when the uniforms were the big, thick wool, heavy material. And he said, Kelly, I wasn't a good hitter. I wasn't a good hitter at all. So it was coming up to his turn to bat, and he realized, he said, you know what? I got to go to the bathroom pretty bad. But then he thinks, you know what? I hadn't gotten a hit all year. What's it matter? I'll go up there and strike out, then I'll come back and take care of business. He said he got up to bat. Lo and behold, he got a base hit. And in his excitement, he hit a double. And in his excitement, standing on second base, he quickly realized the predicament that he was in. He said, Kelly, he said, wasn't nothing I could do about it. He said, in those big, thick wool pants, nobody knew the difference. He said, I just peed all over myself. But yeah, stories like that. I got a lot of stories like that. Boog Powell, as I'm sitting talking to him, and Boog, John Powell, everybody knows him as Boog, and everybody knows the story of his nickname, that his dad said, hey, look at that little booger running around, and it just got shortened to Boog. That's what I assumed. But that was one of my questions. I had standard questions that I asked every player to try to keep it uniform. And he said, you know what, Kelly? He said, I always thought it was from my dad. He said, but I was talking to my Aunt Eunice one day, and she said, Boog, do you know how you actually got that name? He said, well, not really. Just assumed it was from my dad. She said, no, I named you that. I gave you that nickname. And she proceeded to tell him what that story was. So he's telling me this story, and I'm thinking, God, I've never heard this before. I'm getting a scoop. This is going to be something. Well, lo and behold, it was 9 more years since after I talked to him that the book came out, and Boog talked about it in his book. His Aunt Eunice, apparently there was a radio show called Dr. Boogett down in, he grew up in Lakeland, Florida, and then he moved to Key West. His father moved him down. But apparently his Aunt Eunice started calling him Dr. Boogett after this radio show, and it just eventually got shortened to Boog. But yeah, I thought I was getting a scoop of the day, and took me 9 years to get it out, and kind of missed my opportunity there.
I have a question about Tiant.
Yeah.
Did Louis expound or tell you anything about growing up his youth baseball under communist regime? I think his would be most unique.
my interview with Louis, well, let me just kind of set the stage for you. I go down to, volume 2 will be coming out April, May, or June of this year. And the whole introduction is setting the stage for my interview with those 3 gentlemen. But through a series of events, my interviews that I had scheduled were getting pushed back here and there. And all of a sudden, Louis Tiant, Tony Oliva, and Bert Campaneris were standing there in the lobby of the hotel, ready to be interviewed by me at the same time. And I'm thinking, I can't let these guys get away. It's now or never. So I said, you guys interested in setting down all 3 of us together? And they was like, yeah, sure. So we, again, there's a whole story here about me getting followed by MLB security and a bunch of stuff. But I sat down with Louis, Tony, and Bert at the same time.
Wow.
So if you can imagine those 3 trying to understand me and me trying to understand them, it was a little dicey at the beginning, but it turned out great. So with Louis, there was, you know what? There was a little bit of, I don't know if the word bitterness is the right word, but you know, they had to deal with the same segregation, the same BS that the Negro League players had to deal with here. He was dealing with it in Havana. And he went, when he was 12 or 14, he went to Mexico and played in the Mexico League as a professional. And then he came back to Cuba. He was getting pressured by his dad, the team that his dad played on. And I'd have to look up the name of the coach. But the coach, he had not treated Louis real well before he went to played in the Mexican leagues. And then when he came back, Louis had a great season in the Mexican league, and this coach wanted Louis to pitch for him. So there was a lot of bitterness there about how Louis was treated. He didn't specifically mention the communist rule, but there was bitterness there with him. He was a little reluctant in the beginning when we first started talking. You know, his first statement to me was, "What do you want to know?" Pretty much in that tone. But once we started talking, man, the story started flowing. But there was some bitterness, none towards his dad, and you could tell he didn't understand why his dad didn't support him when he was a young boy to play baseball. But he came to understand why that was, because of the segregation, because of all the stuff that he's going to have to deal with. So I did. Now let's see. I think it was Bert. Bert alluded to it a little bit about Castro, in that I guess Castro had told Bert, or the teams in this league that they were playing in, that whoever won the tournament, if it was from a Cuban team, then they would get a all expenses paid trip to somewhere. And Bert's throwaway line to me was, "And we're still waiting for that trip." So,
Thank you.
How about one of our recent Hall of Fame members, Jim Cott?
in talking to Jim, I talked to Jim over the phone, and you could tell Jim grew up with a father who was a historian that loved baseball. And you can tell that in Jim's announcing baseball games. You know, the history that he brings out is amazing, and he brought that out in our conversation. You know, just and it wasn't overt, it was covert. It was, you know, just the way he would tell a story. You could tell there was a lot of history and understanding of the game. One thing that really struck me about Jim, Cott, and Don Sutton is that they both talked about how they learned how to pitch by listening to the radio. Oh gosh, Bobby Shantz was Jim Cott's favorite player. He was I think he was a lefty. He was a lefty like Jim, but where Jim lived in Zeeland, Michigan, he could listen to like three different games at a time, and he would just listen to the announcers describe how the pitchers would deliver the ball, how they would finish their wind up and land on their feet, and how they reacted. And Jim Cott, Don Sutton, both of them talked about how they intently listened to the radio and modeled their pitching motion after the description that they heard from the announcers on the radio. And it was really interesting to hear them talk about those stories.
I'm glad you had a chance to talk to Jim Zapp. I had written his biography for a recent SABR book.
That's right, Bill. I remember seeing that. Yeah. Jim led an interesting life, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
And I think he wasn't bashful in letting it be. Well, I think he let his emotions get in the way of his career some, didn't he?
I couldn't really say. I'd have to go back and read my bio.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, with Jim Zapp, the funny thing about Jim, it's funny, and it's when I got there, was talking to him, I could tell he was the dementia was starting to kick in just a little bit with him. And dementia is very strong in my family. So, you know, I don't take that lightly. But his memories of playing youth baseball, or just his youth, he was a basketball player, but also of his time in World War II playing was really interesting. But one of the biggest kicks he got out of telling me, I asked him about any nicknames, and he said his nickname was Toots. And I said, Toots? He said, yeah, my older brother gave me that nickname. He said, apparently I had a problem. He said, I always knew when he was playing at Sulphurdale Park in Nashville. He said, I always knew when locals were around, when I'd hear them say, come on, Toots, let's go, Toots. So, yeah, Jim was a good one. I'll tell you a story about Whitey Herzog. Whitey, if you remember, when he was with the Kansas City Royals, he was making it to the division finals and getting beat by the Yankees. He told me two stories when he was in high school. One about the finals of baseball state tournament, and one his junior year finals is basketball. I think that's right. There might be flip-flop, but anyway, he felt like he caused his team to lose the basketball state tournament and the baseball state tournament. Then he becomes a manager, and he's getting beat by the Yankees with Kansas City, when he's with Kansas City. Anyway, I found this really interesting and poignant, that he told me when he won the World Series in 1982 with the Cardinals, that he felt like the monkey was finally off his back. And he wasn't just talking about when he was with Kansas City. He was talking about what happened to him when he was in high school. And that to me told me how impactful youth is to these players, just like it is to me, and maybe to everyone else on this Zoom call. They, just because you're a professional doesn't mean you forget about your youth. Mike McFarland told me, he said one of his greatest memories was the first time he saw his name written up in the local newspaper when he hit a home run as a kid. Even though the pros, these things that happened to them as a kid carries through to them. And Bobby Richardson, when I talked to him and I asked him about a game memory, he said, "I'll tell you one." He said it was in it was in maybe the American Legion state tournament to go to nationals, I believe. But anyway, he was turning two and he drug his foot across the base, turned two, and he was running off the field. He looks back and the umpire called the guy at second safe. And it crushed him. They ended up losing the game and losing that state championship. And he told me that play there, that specific play there, forever changed the way he turned two, even through all the championships with the Yankees. That one play there, he goes back to that play when he was 14 years old on how he turned two for the rest of his career. I think our youth is more impactful than we really realize until you start talking about it. I'll say Doug Flynn from the Cincinnati Reds had some great stories. Really, his stories, he was very funny. He told me a lot. We laughed a lot, and his stories from graduating high school, going to junior college, and maturing. He was a small guy, probably 5'9", 5'10", 150, 60 pounds when he graduated high school. Had no offers at all for baseball, and went off to junior college and just playing softball in softball leagues and pick up basketball games. He started maturing and he went to a Cincinnati Reds tryout and ended up getting picked up. That's how he got picked up with the Reds. And somebody asked him what would it take to sign. He said a hot dog and a cold Coke. So he had no real illusions of being a professional baseball player. He was just out having fun, and lo and behold, he gets signed by the Cincinnati Reds. Phil Necro, the scout, came to his house, and the scout told Phil's dad, he said, $500 if Phil will sign. And Phil's dad said, "Mister," he said, "I'm a coal miner. I don't have $500 to give you." Had no idea that the scout was going to give him $500 for Phil to sign. Mike McFarland, who came a decade later, he kind of said, I was very naive. He said a scout approached him. He said, "Hey, buddy, how would you like to be drafted?" And Mike said, my answer was, "Drafted? I got no interest in the military." He turned around and walked off.
Without giving any names, were there any who refused your requests? And if so, did they give you reasons?
Yeah, I had one player, an older player and coach. He played some more of a coach. He had no interest in talking to me. I think he must have had some bad experiences. So yeah, he didn't want to talk to me. But no, once I was able to actually talk to a player and explain what my project was, then again, I was very honest with them. I said, I'm going to take 40 to 50 minutes of your time. I want to talk about your youth career. If you want to talk about your major league career, that's up to you. And this is what this project is. So once I explained to them, once I had the opportunity to actually talk to a player, no one turned me down.
Hmm.
And they were all, like I said, they were all just great. I'm looking at the players' names right now. Yeah, and everybody was just so nice.
I
Thank
know that I know that Tad, being a big Cardinal fan, is still on cloud nine for having the opportunity to interview Jim Cott, and really that was a highlight for our chapter in Louisville, for you to get Jim Cott for our chapter. So what impact has SABR had on your research? Has it opened any doors?
SABR.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You know, it has. And if I pursue any other projects, it will have even more impact. You know, in the beginning, again, I was trying to build some credibility, and you know, it was more of me and the project. But now that, you know, maybe I have a little bit of credibility, and it's not because I don't consider myself a writer at all, because what I did was I transcribed our interviews. My first interview with Jim Hickman, I did not record it. I took extensive notes, and then I went back and I started writing it, and it lost something. You know, it lost, to me, it lost the impact of their words. And that's when I decided I'm just going to transcribe all of our interviews. Yeah, Ryan, to answer your question, moving forward, SABR will be extremely impactful for any projects that I take on.
What was it like to have what was it like for you to hear Jim Cott speak at our meeting?
Oh, I was very happy, very pleased. It told me that I didn't step on, you know, make a fool of myself, and that he would actually go ahead and come on, you know, take my call and come on and speak to us.
I mean, it surprises me. Well, I shouldn't say that it surprises me, but it amazes me that these people don't know you, and they're willing to open up to you so much about baseball. It's just wonderful.
I think it's just simply because I'm asking them about their life experiences that no one asked them about. And, you know, listen, I've got some great memories as a kid, whether it's playing baseball or, you know, pickup games of basketball or just whatever. But I've got some, you know, it's not all fun and games when you're a kid. I mean, there's a lot of tough memories as well. And, you know, I think they appreciated the fact that they had an opportunity to tell some of the stories and also talk about their families and the impact that their fathers and mothers had on their lives, and talk about their favorite players and teams growing up. Stan Musial was a consistently the number one favorite player. Then you got Mantle, a little bit of DiMaggio. Cleveland Indians, surprisingly, was one of the favorite teams that kept popping up. So I think they just enjoyed talking about their hometowns, their parents, you know, their friends. You know, Phil Niekro, his best friend was John Havlicek with the Celtics.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, they grew up next door to each other, and you know, Lou Piniella playing with Tony La Russa, Al Oliver and Larry Heisel. So yeah, it was just, and you know, Willie Horton talked a lot about playing with Bill Freehan and I think him and Fergie Jenkins had some connections. And then Fergie was a big hockey player. He loved hockey. That's where he wanted to play. He wanted to play hockey. He wasn't interested in baseball. But he realized, along with Kevin Seitzer wanted to be a basketball player, but he knew his future was in baseball. And also the players, they really enjoyed talking about 3 areas. Number one, their made up games that they played, pickup games where it might only have 4 or 5 of their friends around. They'd come up with a game. They like talking about that. They like talking about their recruitment and that entry, that transition from a amateur to a professional. Kevin Seitzer was telling me that he knew he needed to get more power in his bat. So he had a tire swing in his yard, and he'd go out and take his bat and just wallop that tire to get stronger. Well, he was telling me a story that he had a basketball laying out in his yard, and he thought, you know what, that tire is doing a pretty good job. I'll just hit this basketball around. So he said he threw the basketball up, and he walloped the fire out of that basketball. And that bat ricocheted off the basketball right between his eyes, knocked him on his can. But he got up and he kept doing it. And that's what the consensus with these players were. Kids have got to get out and just play and not wait for a team to organize a practice or have an organized game. I think that's what the players, these older players, and it might just be their generation, but they consistently talked about how kids just need to get out and do their makeup games.
This may not apply to this group because, after all, they all were very good players, or high level players. But did any of them talk about one of the disappointments of being, or a disappointment of being cut from a team at any point, if any of them were, and how they dealt with that, how they felt?
Yeah, Bobby Richardson was cut from his baseball team, I believe, when he was 13 or 14. One of the questions, one of the chapters, and what I did, and some people like this layout and others don't. I think Ryan, we've talked a little bit, and you kind of struggled with the layout. How I laid this book out was, I have chapters, and so I've got a chapter on family and hometown. And then every player that talked about their family and hometown, I'll tell their story. Versus,
I do have to say, you're right, Kelly. I didn't like the layout. I had to put the book down and then come back to it because the way it's laid out is according to questions. It's not linear in any way. So it's a little bit. Some people out there in the audience are going to struggle with this book initially just because of its outline, but don't let that discourage you from its content.
Oh, right, exactly. And it fits some people's minds, and others it doesn't. That fit me in my mind. My wife, she wanted it done the other way, like how Ryan would have liked it. But in the end, it's like, it's my book. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. So, that's how it's laid out. So as far as, your question about getting cut, I have a chapter on confidence or cockiness. And I think that brings out some of the anxieties that some of the players had when they were kids. Some of them said, yeah, I was cocky, man. I was the best. I knew it, and no one was going to tell me different. And other players were like, I was never really confident. I just, my ability kept me going, but I just never was just completely confident in what I was going to do from one step to the next. So, yeah, it's because of their abilities, they didn't really experience the fact of being cut off of teams, not making a team, but they did have their doubts. Jim Hickman talked to me about, he said, Kelly, he said, I would just like for one time to understand what it's like to be a Hall of Famer. And my response to him was, and Jim, I would love to know what it's like to be you. He played 12 years in the major leagues. He was a comeback player of the year. He's the one that hit the game-winning hit when Pete Rose barreled over Ray Fosse in the All-Star game.
Wow.
There's what is there, like 18,000 players that's ever played in the major leagues over the history of Major League Baseball. So, even playing one day is more than what I'll ever understand or know. Well, I will bring up too real quick. I mentioned Alzheimer's earlier. One of my next projects, if it happens, if it doesn't, it doesn't. But on my website, I'm asking people to post their own memories of either playing youth baseball, their favorite players, going to their first baseball game. It could be their kids or grandkids' baseball game. But if I get enough stories, this one I will self-publish, unless my publisher will do it for free, and give all proceeds to Alzheimer's and cancer. So if you'll see on this page here, the website is just like me, the book, but under your story, you can read about my blog here, just why I want to do this. But here's a story that a gentleman named Robert Story, talking about how his coaches taught him respect. Monty Seeley and Jay Larson, they're out of the Rogers Hornsby chapter. So Monty sent me 2 stories. One about, and I make up the titles just to be fun. He got a kick out of this. They call me Wheels because I'm fast. I wrote one about my one and only Little League home run. So, if you've got a story that you'd like to post, I would love for you to post it on here. And like I said, if I can get enough stories and sell it, publish the book, if it sells, if it sells $10, or if I make $10, the book makes $10, I'll give $10 to Alzheimer's. If it makes $5,000, I'll give $5,000 to Alzheimer's and cancer research. I think it's just, it's in some of the players, like I said, Jim Zapp was experiencing some dementia or exhibiting some dementia. Katie Horseman was as well. There's a few other players, and it just to me, it's sad that what this disease does. I've seen it, and I even lost a classmate that suffered with it, and she's since passed away, way too young. So, anything we can do to help it, I want to help and give back, because this has been fun for me. I mean, this is not anything other than just a fun project, man. I love talking to people like this chapter, like the Babe Ruth chapter. I love Baltimore. I've been to the Baltimore Museum or the Babe Ruth Museum 2 times at least, maybe 3. Shoot, this is fun. And anybody that has a project that you want to do, that you're thinking about, do it. I mean, it's just, it's that challenge. So I get off my soapbox there on that. So I'm sorry. Any other questions?
Yeah, Kelly, um,
Yes, sir.
I had to run out to avoid a Steve Blast moment when you were mentioning Phil Necro and John Havlicek. Were they next door neighbors?
Well, they live within walking distance. I don't know if it was next door, but they were, the way Phil talked, they were always at each other's house. And apparently John's family had one of the only TVs in their little town. And so John or Phil spent a lot of time at John's watching TV when they weren't out playing in the woods.
If they grew up along the Ohio River south of Steubenville, think of the areas. Of all your idea for the book, of all the players you interviewed about youth baseball, is there any one or two overarching thoughts that come out of this from all the players you talked to?
Yeah, good question. Number one, I didn't have one single player talk about their mom or dad being overbearing. It was this theme of just letting them play, do the things that they wanted to do, and supporting them. You know, several of the players, their dads coached, but there was never any pressure. It was just support. So that was one underlying theme, was the support aspect of it. Another is that I asked the question, one of the questions I ask is, when did you know you had the ability to play Major League Baseball or professional baseball? And that all ranged in that 14 to 16-year-old age. That when they hit 14 or 16, they knew that they had something that the other kids didn't have, and that they felt like there was an opportunity for them to go on and play some professional ball. But family really was the main thing. I think it was just the support that they gained, and several of the players just talked about that right out. Said, you know, it was, you know, you can't make it if you don't have the support from your family.
Thank you.
Well, guys, we've done pretty well today. Thanks all for coming. We actually have a nice crowd for a lunch meeting. Like I mentioned, if any of you are not on, if you're SABR members, you're not on the Baltimore email list, you can either let me know, or you can go in and log in and add yourself to our roster, so that you stay up to date on all of stuff we have going on. We usually have 2 to 3 Zoom meetings a month, and obviously we have the convention, national convention this summer, assuming it goes forward, but it looks good as of now. It's just 2 years overdue.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
August 17th to the 21st, and the New Englanders up there will be happy because we're hosting Boston that weekend. And also, although Washington is out of town, several of the Orioles regional minor league teams are in town. So for those of you who can come and want to go to Aberdeen or Bowie or something, you'll have the opportunity to do so. So our next Zoom meeting will be the first Wednesday in February, and we're hearing about the Cubs. Roger Snell's book, I think it's on the 1929 Cubs, if I'm not mistaken. So he will be presenting. I'll wear my Cubs hat that day since they are my number 2 team. And again, we won't have a call shot lunch in February because we'll be promoting the birthplaces 3 nights of the Babe Ruth birthday bash and fundraiser, and all of the the programming that goes on with that, of course, which will be virtual again, the second year in a row. So appreciate everybody coming. Obviously, Kelly, thank you. Wonderful
Thank you, Ruth.
product.
Thank you for
Hopefully,
having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully Kelly will be here in the summer with a lot of you guys. The Hyatt Hotel is literally, I'm in my full-time job office. It's literally about 2 blocks away, and I live 8 blocks from the hotel. So I'll be staying at the hotel, but I clearly will be at the convention. But hopefully, for those of you who I don't know or I haven't met in person, hopefully I can do so this summer. We are SABR headquarters is hoping we can get 800 to 900. If I'm not mistaken, Phil Allen's still on here. The biggest convention to date thus far was Manhattan a couple years ago. So, and that was a little over 800. So we're hoping to possibly shatter that attendance record, considering it's been be 3 years since the last one. And a lot of us baseball fans are chomping at the bit to get out there and engaging with each other once again in person. So we have no other questions. Thanks, everybody. Glad to see a lot of faces. We have some of our regulars and a couple newcomers. Francis is always here. He's North Carolina. He comes to every Baltimore thing we have. So we're going to get him an honorary award. But opening day, as you know, assuming the season happens, the Orioles open at home on March 31st against Toronto. For those of us who are season ticket holders, the Orioles home game times are already announced for 2022. So I'm excited once this lockout is behind us. So pick up Kelly's book. It's worth the read. I'm looking forward. He sent me a draft version of volume 2. I'm looking forward to getting that when it comes out. We support each other in favor. You know, we all have our loves and our teams and our favorite players and favorite moments in history. And so many people do wonderful research, and it's great to support one another. And I think SABR's at its, Bill would know that better than I think the pandemic has benefited SABR greatly, and membership has gone through the roof. Since a lot of us didn't do anything in 2020, you know, we've kind of gotten to know each other via Zooms and research and what we can to get by. So I appreciate all of you. And hopefully you'll see you either at the next Baltimore chapter meeting or definitely this summer in August, right here at the Inner Harbor. So I bid you all adieu. Got to get back to work. Probably not the only one, but see you next time around, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.